Hi everyone, and welcome to Chapter 8, Transport in Mammals. Now you must be wondering why my background is full of toilet paper. Well, you will find out if you stay to the end. Well, actually, if you stay midway. But anyways, welcome to Chapter 8, and here we are talking about mammals instead of plants now, about probably things that move a little bit more. Require a more complex circulatory system. So I'm not sure why you're so happy, to be honest. I'm kidding. They're great. Transport in mammals has two parts. Here we have part 1, circulatory system, and part 2 is about the heart. Part 1 is a bit longer than part 2. So today we're just going to be doing a little bit of an introduction and part 1A, which is blood vessels. So here we are, part 1. So before we start, I guess we need to answer the question, why do we need to learn about transport systems anyway? Why do we even need one? Why do humans need lungs and a heart and, blood vessels? I mean, like the physical ones. Yeah? Why is that? Well, it's because oxygen won't just diffuse into us because we have a small surface to volume ratio compared to unicellular organisms. I am very big compared to a slightly tiny little cell. I mean, very small compared to you, but big compared to a very tiny little cell. Which means, hey, there will be longer distance for gas, nutrients, or hormones to reach the tissues. And I move a lot more than like unicellular organisms. There's higher demands for nutrients and gas. Diffusion alone will be too slow to satisfy my oxygen and glucose needs. So an efficient supply of gas, nutrients, or hormones are needed here. So what do you need? What's the answer to this? Well, a transport system. Transport systems reduce diffusion systems. They can transport large amounts of required materials at once, and it's pretty efficient. So that's why we need transport systems. Now you can ignore this non-halal sort of picture, which I sort of made more discreet. It was not previously. Anyways, yeah, this is the introduction to part 1, which is the idea that we have a cardiovascular system. It's like right? It is also called the circulatory system. Now, cardio really refers to the heart, and vascular refers to the vessels. The circulatory system is made up of the blood vessels, the blood inside those blood vessels, lymph, which we will talk about later on, and the heart. Now, it's needed, obviously, as every transport system is for, it's to transport stuff, to transport nutrients around the body to the tissues, to dispose of waste materials, to transport hormones here and there, and of course to circulate the white blood cells and the red blood cells in the body for their specific functions. Now, our circulatory system is not just any circulatory system, it is a closed double circulatory system. What does that mean? We're going to break them apart and define them individually. You have to answer like this in exams as well. Close, we will define first, and then double, we will define later. Close means that blood is contained in blood vessels. Close means that the blood is always in the heart, arteries, veins, or capillaries. Okay, that's close. How about double? Double means that the blood passes through the heart twice in one complete circuit. This always comes out. Is the definition for a closed double circulatory system, so you definitely should remember it. Closed means blood is contained in blood vessels. Double means blood passes through the heart twice. Now, what do you mean by one circuit? Well, one circuit is 2 circulations. So there are 2 types of circulations here. One is called pulmonary circulation, and pulmonary is really talking about the lungs. Okay, anything to do with the lungs is called pulmonary. You'll see what I mean in my next chapter as well. Pulmonary is when the blood, the deoxygenated blood in the heart here, gets pumped to the lungs, gets oxygenated, and then moves back into the heart. That is the pulmonary circulation right there. Whereas the systemic circulation, right? Systemic circulation is when the oxygenated blood exits the heart, gets pumped to the rest of the body, delivers the oxygen there, and then deoxygenated blood returns back to the heart. So circulation to other parts of the body and heart all except the lungs. So that's pulmonary and systemic. And as you can see here, that one complete circuit, so from this point up to lungs back and up to into the tissues and back, means that we have to pass through the heart twice in order to complete one circuit. So again, close means blood is contained in the vessels, and double means that blood passes through the heart twice. Now, this is a side note, but sometimes they might ask, you don't need to know any of the details here, but you need to know that, hey, there's such thing called an open circulatory system as well, and there's such thing called a single circulatory system as well. Both these systems are single. As you can see, they pass through the heart once to the heart. Now, this open circulatory system here is where the hemolymph in the grasshopper is not called blood. The hemolymph is leaking out from the vessels to the surrounding organs. It's direct contact. Whereas in a closed circulatory system in this earthworm here, it is only contained in the blood vessels. So our friend little grasshopper here has an open circulatory system, which is most probably single, right? And a closed circulatory system is for the earthworm, and this is a single closed circulatory system in specific. It only passes through the heart once. Okay, so now on to part 1A, blood vessels. Yay! So there are 3 types of blood vessels that we sort of need to know. Number 1 is arteries. It carries blood away from the heart. This is all very basic and you should have learned this already, but here's a reminder. It carries oxygenated blood. Now, all except for the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary means lungs. Now, pulmonary means lungs. So pulmonary artery delivers blood to the lungs from the heart. And this blood is deoxygenated. Okay? So all arteries carry oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary artery. Number 2 is the capillaries. Capillaries are called exchange vessels where it brings blood close to tissues and stuff gets exchanged there. And the last one we know is veins. Veins carry blood towards the heart instead of away from the heart. And instead of oxygenated blood, it carries deoxygenated blood. Well, again, except for the pulmonary vein. Pulmonary again means lungs. So pulmonary vein is talking about blood that's traveling from the lungs to the heart. And this pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood. So arteries, capillaries, veins. Now, actually, in between those things, there are smaller vessels as well. Smaller arteries are called arterials, and smaller veins are called venules. So the blood will flow from the arteries, from the heart, to the arteries, to the arterioles, to the capillaries, to the venules, and into the veins. Okay, let's break it down one by one. Let's talk about arteries. Arteries, there's one thing to know about them, and always keep in mind, is that arteries are the one carrying the blood away from the heart, which means it's the closest in proximity to the heart. It's a shorter distance from the heart, which means when the heart is pumping, right, it is pumping at very high pressure in the arteries. Okay, so blood pumped from the heart travels at high pressure in the arteries. Now, how do you identify it? You need to identify it. So how do you identify it? It has a well-defined oval-shaped dish. Yeah? You can see it's pretty oval. It has quite a thick wall in comparison to the lumen, and a very narrow lumen in comparison to the wall. I know, a bit redundant, but you need to remember both things. Thick wall, narrow lumen, compared to veins. You'll see why later. It has a little bit of a folded endothelium. Not that it's really very folded, but it tends to have that appearance here. What's an endothelium? Endothelium is the inner layer of the artery, which we'll talk about in a second. Calm down. Okay, so I told you this in a second. Arterial wall has 3 layers, and there's this inner layer called tunica intima, or it is called the endothelium. Okay, intima means intimate, right? Which means like inside. So tunica intima makes sense. Tunica media is the medium layer, which is the thickest part of the artery here. And the tunica externa is on the outside, external, right? On the outside. And you can see that it's this like this little dotty thing outside and the white ring around it. That's tunica externa, and that's the 3 layers. But if you look closely, you will see like these purplish stained darkly thingies inside there that looks like layers as well. Now those are actually smooth muscle cells, and I sort of thought about it in a while, and I'm like, hey, the more I look at it, the more it looks like a roll of toilet paper. Don't you think so? Let me show you. See, this is an artery. Imagine this roll in the middle, this brown thing in the middle. This is the tunica intima, which is very thin. It's like 1 cell thick, and you have like this thicker layer here, okay, of tunica media. And tunica media has all these smooth muscle cells which have like layers, right? And you can see it in the microscope, micrograph as well. And it sort of reminds me of tissue paper layers. I mean, this is more dense than that, but you know, it reminds me, okay? There's this outer layer which there's currently messy tissue paper around, but let's call it a tunica externa. How about that? I hope that helps you remember some stuff. Okay, but each of these layers have their characteristics. So let's delve into them right now. So tunica intima, or the endothelial layer. Now this layer is very thin. It is made up of squamous epithelial cells, and you can see here that they look like roti canais or like eggs. I'm kidding, but you know, you get the idea. It's quite flat, and it sort of makes a layer around it. It is 1 cell thick layer, yeah. So you can see this gray area. This is just 1 cell thick, which makes it a very thin layer. Now it has quite a smooth surface. It has no projections of microvilli or cilia, anything like that, and that is to reduce the friction of blood flow. Now, of course, in the artery, it's slightly folded, but the folding is not due to the appearance of the cell. It is just because it's a very small space. Now, that is the tunica intima. Now, let's talk about the tunica media. Tunica media, again, is the thickest layer. Now, it's made out of 3 components, which we'll go through one by one. Remember it for now. The collagen fibers, okay, the elastic fibers, and smooth muscle. So collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and the smooth muscle. Let's break those 3 things down and remember the function for each one of them. So number 1 is collagen fibers, and these are present in a relatively smaller amount compared to smooth muscle and elastic fibers. Now, what's it for? It is to withstand high pressure. It prevents the rupture of vessels. Collagen is always, it has a high tensile strength. Remember, right, chapter 2, right, high tensile strength, and it's a structural component, and it can withstand high pressure there. Number 2 is elastic fibers. Now, elastic fibers, think of like a rubber band. It allows the vessels to stretch and withstand high pressure. Give me a moment. I found an elastic fiber. I'm kidding. I found a rubber band-ish thing. It's just hair scrunchie, but whatever. Now, it allows the vessel to stretch a little bit when there's high pressure, sort of stretches the vessel a little bit. And then when there is a lower pressure, it can snap right back to its normal shape. Now, this allows it to maintain blood pressure because, yeah. And number 3 is quite interesting. It's this idea of smoothing out pulsatile flow. And what in the world is pulsatile flow? And how does it keep the blood moving forwards? Let's talk about it slightly. Now, you know, in the arteries, as I said, there is high pressure, but it's not constantly high pressure. It is like pulsating pressure. Why is that? It's very close to the heart, okay? And when it leaves the aorta, which is like the biggest artery, like coming out from the heart, right? The pressure is very high when the heart is contracting and the blood is coming out. And then when the heart relaxes, the pressure sort of drops. So you have this like up, down, like contract, relax, you know, up, down, pulsatile flow, pulsating, you know. So it's a pulsatile flow when it goes up and down. Now, elastic fibers actually smooth out this pulsatile flow. And you can see here that the pulsatile flow actually becomes smaller and smaller as it moves away, further away from the heart. Now, how do elastic fibers do this? Now, because they can stretch, right, and it can snap back to its original shape. When the pressure is high, it can stretch, and then when the pressure is low, it can snap right back. So it gives it some sort of flexibility and makes it not affect the next vessel so much. Okay, so if this side is already expanding, the following part of the blood vessel won't be as affected as the pulse flow because this particular region is already managing it. Now this allows it to maintain blood pressure to some extent, and this keeps blood moving forwards because when it stretches and recoils, it gives it a small push forward. So yeah, that is elastic fibers. In general, it is to withstand high pressure and to maintain blood pressure. Now, how about smooth muscle? Our toilet paper. It has many layers in the arteries. This is a major part of the artery. And what it does is also maintain blood pressure. And how does it do that? It actually contracts or relaxes to change the volume of the blood delivered. You understand that? Let me explain. So the smooth muscle works differently from an elastic fiber. Elastic fiber, don't care, right? When a smooth muscle is contracting, relaxing first. When the muscles are relaxing, what happens is the arterioles become dilated. So when it's relaxing, it's like, bigger, right? And then that increases blood flow. But when it's contracted, okay, so my muscles contract, arterioles become constricted. Note the language, muscles relax, contract, arterioles dilate, constrict. So arterioles become constrict, then the blood volume that can pass through this is slow. So this keeps blood moving forwards because that contraction and that relaxation can push it as well. So again, a recap, Tunica media has 3 components. Number 1, it's collagen fibers, a small amount of that. Number 2 is elastic fibers, quite a fair bit of that. And the major component here is smooth muscles. So collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and smooth muscles for the tunica media. Now let's talk about the tunica externa. Now it has 2 components, and these 2 components, fortunately, you have just learned them. It's also collagen fibers to withstand high pressure, same words here. And number 2 is elastic fiber, again, same words here. Now, you can see here, take a closer look at the cross section here. You can see the endothelium is 1 layer. You can see that in the tunica media here, there is a lot of smooth muscle. There's some, okay, you can see here that there is some like elastic fibers here and collagen fibers that are in the external elastic membrane is in blue, and the collagen fibers are actually very little. The tunica externa here looks even more like toilet paper here, but actually doesn't look like much under the microscope because it's too small. You can see here there's a lot of collagen to withstand that high pressure. So yeah, that's a zoom in version of tunica externa. So, yep, there's 3 layers of arteries: the endothelium, right, which is a tunica intima, tunica media, and the tunica externa. Now, how about arterioles and how does it differ? Now, arterioles are pretty much the same, except that it's further away from the heart and it's a little bit smaller, isn't it? So when it's a little bit smaller, a little bit further, it requires less thickness in the walls and less elasticity as well. So it has less elastic fibers and instead more smooth muscles, because smooth muscles can contract, relax, and keep blood moving even when the pressure is lower. And less elastic fibers are there because it doesn't need to stretch as much as arteries that are closer to the heart. So arterioles have less elastic fibers and more smooth muscles to keep blood moving forward. With that, we are now at capillaries. Went from the arteries to the arterioles to the capillaries. Now the vessel diameter is around 7 micrometers, which is very small. Okay, It is made up of also endothelial cells or squamous epithelial cells, which are these flattened cells that make up cell membrane. So basically it's this, but just without the white bits, just the brown bit here, right? It's made up of endothelial cells. And it is adapted for function. How and why? First of all, it's one cell thick. Again, it's an exchange vessel, so it's very important for it to have a short diffusion distance. Number two, it has pores or gaps between endothelial cells, so it's not completely impermeable to water. It has pores and gaps, and this allows some smaller components of blood to pass through, and allows the formation of what we'll learn next video, formation of tissue fluid. Number three, it pretty much has a very small lumen diameter, and that is really to slow down the flow of blood. Now you'll think, why would that be efficient? And the reasoning is because it brings the red blood cell close to tissue and makes sure that it has time to diffuse. Okay, so it's not like shoo, pass, but it's slow, it's steady, everything that's transported properly. Of course, the network of capillaries. So you can see there's a lot of small ones here. It forms a capillary bed, and that has high surface area and allows more exchange of substances. So that's capillary, pretty simple, just one layer, one cell thick, endothelial cells. Oh yeah, I forgot. Right, there's one more picture here. It's quite interesting, really. It has these endothelial cell, one cell thick, as you can see. This is capillary because look, there's no other layers outside. It's just one cell here and one cell here, and there's one cell here as well connected. And then here we know that it is a red blood cell, and it looks a little bit contorted, looks a bit funny, but actually is normal because this is a cross section, might be a weird section, and also red blood cells are quite flexible in order to squeeze through capillaries. Capillaries are very small, okay, they're only 7 micrometers. Red blood cells are around 6 to 8 micrometers. So yeah, so that's capillaries for you. Let's move on to veins. So we've done arteries, arterials, capillaries. We then do venules, but it's pretty much the same as veins. Now veins, one thing to take note about veins is that they return the blood to the heart, and by this time it's very, very far from the heart already. So it has a lower blood pressure. It has a slower blood flow than in artery because there's not so much pressure. Now when I say low blood pressure, I really mean like almost zero blood pressure, very, very low blood pressure, very, very far from the heart already. But it's still flowing, and we'll see why in a sec. Okay, so the vein, in terms of its structure, also has 3 layers. It has the tunica intima, which is the endothelial layer. That's the tunica media, and that's the tunica externa. But in terms of thickness of the layer and components-wise, it's slightly different, just slightly. Okay, let's look at the appearance first, though. The appearance is a regular flattened oval shape. As you can see, this one looks like toilet paper. This one does not. Looks like flattened toilet paper. That is not a thing. So it's irregular in shape, probably due to its wall not being very strong in that sense. It has a wider lumen in relation to the thickness of wall. It's always in relation to the thickness of wall. Here, small lumen, thick wall. You can see the wall extends from this dark purple layer in here all the way to this dark purple layer outside. So quite a big wall, small terrain comparison. Lumen here, it's sort of stretched out the whole way. If you get the average of that, you can imagine it expanded. It's still quite a big lumen compared to the thickness of the wall proportions. In terms of tunica media as well, you can see the vein one is much, much thinner than the arteries. It has less elastic tissue and less smooth muscles. Well, simply because it has a very low blood pressure, it does not need that much elastic tissue and does not need that much smooth muscles as the artery does. And last but not least, the tunica intima is not wavy looking. Okay, inside it's pretty smooth, unlike the artery. Now there are additional features other than what we just talked about, the tunica media being thinner and all. By the way, the thickest layer here of the veins is really the tunica externa. But other than that, there are additional features such as valves. And valves, as you know, prevents the backflow of blood and ensures blood flows towards the heart. Now, when blood flows to the heart in the right direction, the valves will open. But when the blood travels in the opposite direction, you can see here, it actually pushes the valves closed. I sort of think of the direction of valves like an arrow. See, it looks like it's pointing this way. Maybe telling the blood that, hey, it's this way. It's pointing this way. I'm telling you that because it might prove useful to drawing the structure of valve. Like if they make you draw valves, you will be able to draw in the right direction. Okay, it's like a pointing towards this direction. Okay, anyways, that's number one. Number two is not really the structure of the vein itself, but more that what is surrounding it. So usually, blood in the arteries are moving because of the heart, right? But in the veins, it's quite far away from the heart and it's quite low pressure. So how does it move exactly? The pressure is almost zero here. So it's actually surrounded by the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are not muscles you can control. They are attached to your limbs. So every time you do this, you're moving a skeletal muscle, walking around, right? And whenever you are moving or contracting those muscles, the blood in the veins are being pushed towards the heart. So you can expect that speed to be quite slow compared to the arteries. It's still moving though. It's not as slow as the capillaries, but it is not as fast as the arteries. Okay, so we have done the arteries here, we've done the veins, we've done the capillaries. The arteries have 3 layers. The veins also have 3 layers. But in terms of appearance and amount of elastic fibers and smooth muscles, they vary. Capillary obviously only has 1 layer. You can see the differences here, and you can see the differently stained micrographs. Now, when you draw a plan diagram of it, which they do ask you to do in exams, make sure you draw 3 layers if you're looking at the artery or the vein. And even if you cannot really see it, you know that it is there. There is a very one-sided layer, and therefore you have to draw it. And other times you can see that it's actually there. You can see this darkly stained ring here, and then there's a darker ring outside and a light. So there's a dark stain, and there's a light layer and a dark layer. So this is actually 3 layers: tunica intima, tunica media, and tunica externa. So always draw 3 layers when you're drawing arteries or veins in plan diagrams. In capillaries, obviously they are not very seen and it's very, very tiny. So you sort of no need to draw, like it's very rare that they ask you to draw them. Okay, let's talk about blood vessels as a whole. Okay, so there are a few graphs here to look at as blood moves from the arteries to the arterioles to capillaries to venules to veins. So first of all, we need to compare is the lumen diameter. Now, lumen diameter in the arteries is relatively narrow. Okay, and capillaries, of course, the most narrow, and veins would be very high. I don't think this needs much explanation. How about the area, the surface area we're talking about here? Of course, capillaries, there is a network, so therefore, they result in a high surface area. So it will go up like this and then back down again. How about speed? As we said just now, arteries is very, very close to the heart, and therefore it has a very high pressure that is traveling at high speed here. Veins, however, has a lower speed here. It's still moving faster than capillaries because it's it's a highway compared to a small tiny road, right? But because it's further away from the heart and it's only moved by skeletal muscles, this means that it is lower than the ones in the arteries. It won't be ever as high. The last graph here is pressure. You can see here the pulsating pressure. You can see here from big becoming small. Again, this is smoothed out by the elastic fibers inside the arteries. The high parts we call systolic pressure. We will explain that in part 2, and minimum one we call it diastolic pressure. Again, we will explain that in part 2. All will be clear. But why is it decreasing all the way? Now, it's just because These areas are close to the heart, therefore high blood pressure, and pressure is very, very low in the veins. And you can see here, it's already touching 0 by the time you reach the venules and veins. So yeah, those are the 4 graphs that you need to know. The exercises in the quiz will help you get your head around it. So yeah, that's it for blood vessels. This is a summary slide for you to look at, and I won't repeat everything again, except the fact that you need to be able to compare and contrast them, and you need to be able to look at diagrams and identify what is what. So that's it for now. I'll see you next video. Bye!